Welcome to the 2019 Point in Time Homeless Count training. In this section, we will be discussing how to complete the survey form for unsheltered count. Unsheltered would include anyone who is in a place not meant for human habitation. So this would include persons who may be living in their vehicle or at the park, in an abandoned building, or any place under an overpass, encampments, or just anywhere out in the streets. You may also use this form for conducting a count at any of the services-based locations. This would include soup kitchens, food banks, any day or drop-in centers, Department of Social Services, and the libraries. And in addition, you can use this form to conduct the count for up to 7 days, even after the point in time date of January 30th. So just keep that in mind. So if you happen to be at any of those locations, the service-based locations, you can continue to survey anyone who may be identified as literally homeless or unsheltered. So let's just get started in reviewing the form. If you're conducting the unsheltered count, your form should look like this. It would have the blue header with the title in the upper left, unsheltered count. And the rest of the form, you have several questions, up to about 16. However, keep in mind that questions 1 through 9 and number 12 are very important questions if you can't complete the entire form, but and only have a little time, or if it seems that the person may not want to, maybe a little agitated and not want to really answer too many questions. If you can at least complete questions 1 through 9 and question 12, then that would capture important data that we will need for local, state, and federal planning purposes. So let's get started with the first section. It's pretty much self-explanatory. Just with the location, you just need to indicate a general area. You don't have to put a exact address, so you can maybe just put an intersection. If you're outside, you could just indicate an intersection, or if you're happen to be near a Walmart, or you can just indicate specify a general area or location. If it's the library, then just put headquarters library, or whichever library you may be conducting the survey. Go ahead and put the date and time, and also your name or agency or group and your telephone number. So that way, in case there are some discrepancies or corrections we need to make, we can contact you to clarify any information on the form. Go ahead and follow this script, or you can follow the other scripts that we may have provided to you during the training session. Now, when you first approach an individual, and hopefully you have attended the training that was conducted on the 15th, and if not, then please make sure you review the video on how to approach anyone who may be homeless. And it also provides some safety tips. So when you first approach an individual, go ahead and follow a script. And If they agree to proceed with conducting a survey, then go ahead and select yes and proceed to question number 1. If they decline, then go ahead and select no. But at this point, you can go ahead and just use the observation method. Don't ask any questions. Um, in the training, we suggested that you don't assume, but only during this time when you can go ahead and just assume what their housing situation may be without asking any questions. So just use the observation method um, when if they decline to proceed with the survey. The main thing that during with the observation method, you may only be able to indicate whether or not they are unsheltered. Only, pretty much if it's obvious. If you see that they are in their vehicle, or if they're in the woods, or um, under a bridge, if it's pretty obvious, then go ahead and select unsheltered, and then you can proceed with maybe answering a few of the questions on page 2. Some, of course, you won't have an idea of their age and their gender, race. Again, some things you may be able to assume, but with observation method, you will only be able to probably complete a little bit of page 1 and in page 2. The rest of the questions on page 3, you will not be able to complete on just using the observation method, because those are detailed questions that only they would know. So if they agree to participate, then go ahead and select yes. Proceed to question number 1. And you don't want to read the categories to them that's on the right. You want to go ahead and ask them, where did they sleep on the night of Wednesday, January 30th? And then based on their response is where you would select which of these categories they will fall under. So you would notice that there are 2 categories. We have it separated by literally homeless. And so that's so if they're literally homeless, that means they're either unsheltered, um, in an emergency shelter, such as like the Salvation Army, um, or they're in a transitional housing program, or in a hotel or motel paid for by any agency, such as a nonprofit agency, faith-based organization, or some type of an emergency assistance. If they don't fall under any of those categories, then they may be at risk. And so you would check one of these categories to see if they may fall in one of these categories. They have to fall in one of the 2 categories, literally homeless or at risk of homeless. And this question is very important, the most important question of the survey, and the reason why we are conducting the survey, because we are trying to determine how many are actually unsheltered and how many are actually sheltered. Then proceed to number 2 and just basically, or actually you can ask this question first, because actually it should be first, but have you already answered these questions today with another volunteer? And if they say yes, then you can stop right there and move on to the next person. If no, then go ahead and continue to answering the next questions on page 2. On page 2, question number 3, which best describes your family or household staying with you tonight? So they're going to fall under one of these 3 categories, either household without children. So if they're a single adult with no children, then they will fall under one of these categories here under the first column. If they are, if there is adults and children, then they will fall under the categories of the second column. And if they are only children, so basically um, those who are 17 and younger, if they are by themselves, then they will fall under the third category. And this, at this point, is where you want to find out a little bit more information. And because technically, if they are um, children that are 17 or younger and not living anyone, then that's when you may want to go ahead, or you must go ahead and try to get as much information and report them to the Department of Social Services. From there, you will go ahead and proceed to question 4, and this is the makeup of the household. Start with the head of household for the first column, basically obtaining their first and last initial. If you can get their date of birth, that would be great. If not, then their age is fine, and they will fall under one of these age categories. Select their gender, and there's 4 selections under gender. You have male, female, transgender, and those that are non-conforming. So basically, someone who don't identify with any of the genders. Race, and then the rest of the questions are pretty self-explanatory. Select whether or not they're Hispanic, if they are military veteran, if they have a disability. As far as military veteran, you don't have to ask for verification. Just ask them if they are a military veteran. Just select yes or no. At this point, we're not trying to get any type of verification. This is just a survey. On page 3, these are questions now where the first questions 5 through 9, or questions 5 through 8 are important, because it basically will tell us whether or not they fall under the definition of chronically homeless. And if you're not familiar with the definitions of homeless or chronically homeless, those definitions are located in your packet on the instructions form on the back of the instructions form. But these questions will help us in identifying whether or not they are chronically homeless, or as question number 9, whether or not they are fleeing from domestic violence. And then the rest of the questions, again, are self-explanatory. It asks if they receive any disability benefits. And as I mentioned before, question 12 is very important because it asks about their disability status. So if they have a mental or physical disability, please make sure you select the appropriate category. And then questions 13 through 16, again, those are self-explanatory. Once you have completed the form, make any necessary notes on page 4. And once you have completed conducting the street count, then go ahead and compile all your forms. And what you want to do first is separate them based on whether or not, and you'll want to separate them into certain stacks. So first, separate them by whether for those who are literally homeless and those who are at risk of homeless. So separate your stacks with based on those 2 categories. Then from there, you want to further separate those stacks into those who fall under the category of household without children, household with adults and children, and household with only children. And once you've separated those categories, move on to completing the tally form, which is where I will discuss how to complete that form on the next session.